Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 28th edition of Beyond the Data. Tonight we have with us a special guest, State Senator Andrew Brenner. November 28th edition. Uh-oh, we got a little bit of an echo there.
That's because I got her on in the background.
Oh, there you go. So Senator Brenner represents the 19th district, I believe, and that covers Delaware County, Knox County, and for now, at least, a little bit of Columbus, right?
Yes, it covers the 22nd House District in Columbus, which includes Clintonville, the West Campus of Ohio State, and the Schottenstein Center, but not the Horseshoe. So I don't cover the Ohio State football team.
Yeah, well, you won't take it. You won't take responsibility for that. So tonight, we have you on tonight talking about specifically the school situation in Ohio, because of course yes. We know because of the COVID situation, there have been all of these different policies implemented across the state in all sorts of different ways, and it's affecting our kids, and we know that, but we don't talk about it. I mean, everything is all about COVID disease, COVID cases, COVID hospitalizations, and it's all about just this one singular focus that we have obsessed over. And this has been one of my biggest things since the very beginning is looking at the data, because yes, COVID is real. Yes, COVID is highly dangerous to certain segments of the population. And this isn't something that should be pushed under the rug or anything like that. It needs to be acknowledged that it's dangerous. But at the same time, all of these mitigation measures that we're taking need to be done in an intelligent fashion. We need to know what the data is, truly, and we need to understand what the impact is in the different groups, because this affects us all so differently. And it was a couple weeks ago where you talked to me about some of the numbers that are coming out in terms of test scores and absenteeism. And I about fell off of my chair, because it's unreal. It's frustrating. And how can we not know this? How can we not know how bad it is? And so invited you on, and yeah, I'd like you to talk so people can know exactly what's happening to our kids.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. The press isn't reporting about it. This is why. I mean, the bottom line is last school year and the prior school year that ended when the COVID struck and they shut down the schools, we knew that was going to be a problem. But the 2020-2021 school year was also bad. And I've got some data which I'll go over. We had, for those that don't know, I chair the Ohio Senate Education, Primary and Secondary Education Committee. And we had a professor from Ohio State in back on the 26th of October to explain the data. Now, for all those that, just to give a background, obviously the state has standardized tests. They're required by federal law. So this is something that we have to do, or billions of federal dollars don't come back to the state of Ohio, and most of that money is for disability students. So we do the standardized tests. We also do it because we do want to collect the data and see how our schools are performing, and then try to make recommendations for improvements in those schools, or the schools can take that data and say, okay, we've got a problem here. Well, this is what we need to fix. So we went ahead with the standardized tests last spring, which they were performed in April and May, were done by May. And then most of the school districts would have received their data, preliminary data, by July. The public doesn't see the data though, because they have to go through it and verify that the kids were in, school building A versus B and all this. So they would go through and update the data for the next couple months. And then the data becomes public in October, which it became public in about mid-October, is when the state school board basically gave it. So they gave us a PowerPoint presentation, and if you want to pull it up, let me pull it up here.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see if I can get it there. That's it right there. Go to the slide, the first slide. Yeah.
There you go.
This was the impact of COVID-19 on academic performance, and this was PowerPoint by Dr. Vladimir Kogan of Ohio State University. He gave the presentation to us on October 26th, and basically gave us for the 2019-2020 and 2020-21 school years for about learning loss. So as I was explaining, Ohio State's report cards, we have an annual report card data, shows school districts in the state. It captures traditional public schools and districts, community schools, dropout prevention, recovery schools, career tech schools. Information includes student academic performance, enrollment, attendance, participation in state assessments, primary tool that legislators, parents, and stakeholders use. Now, we are a state, it's a public school system, and because of that, it's under the Ohio Constitution, and the Ohio General Assembly has to set the policy. So people may not like politics in it, but it's in it because it's required under state constitutional law. So this is what we had for the 2020-21 school year. This is academic growth declines across all socioeconomic groups. Most substantial decreases were among English learners, economically disadvantaged, and Black students. Chronic absenteeism increased statewide, and I added that data. 16.7% of the students in Ohio were chronically absent in 2018-19. It jumped to 24% of the students in the 2020-21 school year. Now, chronically absent is defined as missing 18 days or more of school unexcused. So if you were off for COVID, and that's excused. So these are unexcused days off. So these are kids, they didn't show up. And you got to remember, the last school year, a lot of them were doing distance learning, they were doing hybrid learning, and they were doing in classroom learning. So chronic absenteeism increased statewide. So 398,484 students were chronically absent approximately. That's out of 1,660,000 students. So 398,000 of them missed 18 days or more of school. If a kid misses more than 10 days, they're probably behind academically. And that's just a fact. That's a fact that data's been out there for a long time. Now this school year, we didn't put up A, B, C, D, or F, or in the case it was A through F, and now we've changed it to a star rating system. But it'll show 1 to 5 stars. And but we didn't rate them this school year because we knew the 2020-21 school year was a mess. So this is the data that the Ohio State professor demonstrated. This shows declines. This shows English language arts, all students. This shows what they performed. And then economically disadvantaged, the numbers just tanked in 2021. They weren't really that great going back the last couple of years either. Nobody wants to seem to talk about that. But if you look at some of this data, Black, non-Hispanic, these are passage rates for state standardized tests. And I'm going to get into that in a second as to what that data is. And I'm going to flip back and forth between this and the other one. And these are our math scores. So, I mean, you're looking at 17% Black, non-Hispanic. If you want to, and people keep saying, there's racism and all this. Well, no, there's not racism, but good heavens, these school systems that are handling these kids who are minorities are doing they need to massively improve. This is just unacceptable. I don't care what the situation is in those kids' classrooms or in their homes. I mean, we're now supplying wraparound services in most of these districts, so they're getting health, they're getting mental health, they're getting fed 3 times a day. So there shouldn't be any excuses. I mean, these numbers are abhorrent. So full impact, and this is something that I didn't tell, I mentioned this at the Ohio Business Roundtable a couple of weeks ago. Full impact of learning loss. This is from a professor at Ohio State. English language arts is a third to a half year behind the typical academic growth. So they've lost basically a half year. Mathematics, a half to 1 year behind typical academic growth. So he was showing there's 3% loss in lifetime income affected and 6%, and that is actually tied to an economic data. And he pointed that out from, I think that was also Ohio State, or somebody came in, I can't remember where it was from. And it was performance was positively linked to access and in-person learning. So the kids were in the schools and they were learning in classroom, they performed better. And that is why almost all of our urban school systems back in August said they were going to go back to school, starting up the kids in masks, because they wanted to keep the kids in the classroom because of the way the quarantine rules were set. There's money available to help. So we got looking to remediation. The federal government has given billions in elementary and secondary school relief funds. This is going to schools. This is how much money the state of Ohio has received, and that's how much per student. And you got to remember, we're spending around 11 to 12,000 per year per student on average. So this is supplemental to that. The districts don't even know how to spend all that money. I think this is an all-hands-on-deck approach is needed to begin addressing the significant learning losses with our local classrooms, and it's important. So this is coming from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. This is ESSER. ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER and ARP, American Rescue Plan. So these are dollars that the federal government has just forked out there and given to all the states. And Ohio is, I think we still get another like 8 billion or something is still coming. So under ESSER 1, this was passed in March of 2020. 13 billion of it went to the Education Stabilization Fund through the Coronavirus Relief Act, CARES Act. So that would be ESSER 1. ESSER 2 came in January of 2021, and that was an additional 54 billion to the states. And then the American Rescue Plan dumped another 122 billion into the state. So there's tons of money that is available in Ohio for all schools, for every single student. Doesn't matter where they go, there's money available for those students. The Ohio General Assembly, though, has no control over how the districts spend the funds. Basically, under these ESSER rules, the money is given to the districts, and it was allocated based on a federal formula of number of economically disadvantaged students. So there are 4 school districts. One I happen to represent, which is Olentangy, received 0 of these dollars because they have only, the threshold was you had to have 2% of your students were economically disadvantaged. Olentangy's was 1.6% at the time, so they received $0. There was one school district that received $19,000 per student in aid, and I can't remember that it begins with a B. I would say, I would probably mess it up. I had it written down somewhere on my stack of stuff here, as the late Rush Limbaugh would probably put. But anyway, so we did, though, put into Senate Bill 229, which is now coming back to the Senate. We'll be voting on that next week. The House voted it out. We'll require schools to at least submit learning loss remediation plans. And so most of them have already done it or have done something. But there's going to be a lot of learning loss. And I'm going to get into some of the data here. And then I'm going to also pull up my screen and share it, because I'm going to click on the ODE website where you can see all this stuff. I think we need best practices and all hands on deck, because if we don't, these kids are not going to be able to make up the learning loss.
So here's a quick question in there. I mean, is there a list that tracks what the school districts do with it, or is it, even from the federal side?
There isn't. And to give you an example, we have one school district in Cincinnati decided to take their ESSER dollars to buy back a school building. It's a private transaction, so we were looking to put into Senate Bill 229 something to stop it, but there were some issues there, so we had the House remove it. That they're going to take the ESSER dollars to buy back a school building that they'd sold to a charter school or to a private entity that has a charter school in it with an 8-year lease, so that they probably can shut the school down and eliminate their competition. Okay, this is with their ESSER dollars. This is your federal tax dollars. They're using it to wipe out. And by the way, the charter schools in Ohio, for those that don't know, they're public schools. They have to accept all students, okay? They are not non-chartered, non-public schools. These are chartered public schools. And this particular one has it in there. So I'm going to explain this performance index, because we're going to get into the data here, and some of you all are going to probably, I do pop quiz to everybody. So the performance index measures the achievements of students on state-required assessments, assigning points for each student's level of achievement using an index between 0 and 120 points. So depending on how they perform on the 5 ranges from limited to advanced, they add it up, they correlate it, and basically add up the numbers, and then they come up with the number. And the percentage of 120 points is what they've determined, the overall achievement is for the school district. So that way we would know, what that is. So chronic absenteeism measures the percentage of students in each school year or school district who are absent for at least 10% of the school year. Again, that's a lot. So my next slide is the numbers from some school districts. So these are some here in Central Ohio. So the first number is what they performed on the performance index. So Upper Arlington scored a 75%, and they had 5.3% of their kids were chronically absent. Reynoldsburg, which is a suburban district, had 54% on their overall achievement number, and 22% chronic absenteeism. My alma mater over there is Buckeye Valley. They had a 70.1%. It's a rural school system here in northern Delaware County. And they had a chronic absenteeism of 16%. But London City Schools, which is in a rural Madison County, is 58.5%. It was their achievement index, and almost 30% of their kids were chronically absent. Now, these numbers are down, and they're down because the 2020-21 school year was messed up. I think they're, so we can partially explain that. Some of these schools, I think if you were to correlate, were they in classroom or were they distance learning? I'm guessing London was probably distance learning. So you're probably going to see a lower number there. But they also had a very high chronic absentee rate. I mean, that's 30% of their kids just missed 10% or more of the school year. So now is where we get to the bad school districts, which is, I'm saying bad in the sense of their numbers are bad. I don't know how else to put this. Here you go. Columbus City Schools, 37.9% is their achievement. Now, if you note at the bottom of the screen there, I have ECOT. In 2016, remember the electronic classroom of tomorrow, we shut them down, and their achievement rate was 55%. And we said they stole money from the taxpayers at 55%. Columbus is 37.9%, and they had a chronic absenteeism of 74.6% of their kids. How do you do that? Now, Columbus was mostly doing distance learning most of last school year, so I suspect that's part of the problem. In fact, I think all of last school year they pretty much were, and they started off the beginning of the school year, I think, distance. Cleveland, 31.9. I put East Cleveland, Lorain, and Youngstown on there because they're under the Academic Distress Commission, or were. We're giving them a mechanism to get off, but their kids were 54, 56, and 63% chronically absent. So these kids aren't showing up to school yet. We're paying, by the way, in Youngstown, revenue per student in Youngstown is $26,000 per student. So we're spending $26,000 per student in Youngstown for that kind of response. 32%. Mind you, that is significantly lower than ECOT when we shut it down. In fact, every one of these school systems underperformed ECOT.
And this data is this data publicly available? I mean,
publicly data, and I'm going to show you how to get to it because we're going to go right to it when I share my screen here because I've got it on my background here. ECOT 2016 was 55%. I didn't get their chronic absentee. I think it was high too, so I'm not. They had a different model. Toledo, same thing. I mean, these are achievement rates. So let me go, if I can go to my share screen.
Yeah, you need to share it again. But I mean, that would be something very interesting to do for viewers here as well. I mean, I don't have the time, but I mean, if this data is publicly available and correlate it to whether or not they were what their situation is, how much in-school learning, how much distance learning, what kinds of mandates were in effect and quarantine rules, all that kind of stuff. That would be a very interesting correlation to look at because I mean, this was, again, this is from the 2020 to 2021. So this is when things were still, really height of the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. And also lots of the masking, the quarantine.
The masking, the lockdowns, the quarantine all went into effect. So if you see my screen here, I'm going to click it on there so you can see this is Olentangy Schools report card. Now, to get here, I'm going to click my back button. So you go, I'm going to click all the way back. So this is the Ohio School Report Cards. It's reportcard.education.ohio.gov, and you just type in your school district name. That's all you have to do. So then you'll go, the first page that comes up is this page, which is just tells you where the district is. Attendance rate there is pretty good. How many students are there? Average salary of their teachers. Then they got report card overview. This is the one you want to click on. So when you click on that, you get this page. And we didn't rate anybody this school year, which, okay, that's fine. But then you click on this page under achievement. This component represents whether the student performance on state tests met established thresholds and how well students performed on the tests. And I need to point out the fact that the thresholds, you have to get about 50% of the test questions correct in order to pass and be proficient. So when I click on this and I go to Olentangy's, this is the performance index. So as you can see here, you got advanced plus, advanced, accelerated, proficient, basic, limited, and untested. So percent of students. Here in Olentangy, almost 13% of the students in Olentangy were not tested. Now, had they been tested, they might have been up in this range. We don't know. But we do know that quite a few of them weren't tested. So that's kind of it. So these are the achievement points based on a factor level that was determined by the State Board of Education. And then they calculate it, and that comes up with their achievement index score. So that is 87.9 out of a possible 120 points. And Olentangy, in this case, received a 73.2%. So you can click on the trend, and this clearly shows that they've been trending down because of the school year. And I think we can blame them. I mean, they've been up here at the 105 level. But over here on this side of the page is, the percentage of students that passed the tests. So as you can see, in Olentangy, they did pretty decently. I mean, 85, 88, 91, 80% in math. And by the way, fifth graders across the board, remember, you need to only get about 50% of the test questions correct in order to be proficient. So to get this proficient level, you need about 50% of the test questions correct. So here, Olentangy's 8th grade math, for whatever reason, only 63% of their kids passed it. Now, this was not rated, so this number did not come in. So I've got some other schools here that I pulled up. So your school district of West Geauga actually did better. They had an 85.9, and you were telling me that they were in school pretty much the whole school year, correct?
Yeah, I mean, my daughter is homeschooled for medical reasons, of course. So we don't actually. Yeah. I'm not so familiar with what they were doing, but I do remember that they were one of the schools that win pack really fast.
Well, as you can see, I mean, they did well. I mean, there were some 70s here, and in high school, they had pretty much 80s. Geometry didn't do well. Geometry is low for everybody. But now things are going to go off a cliff here. So I'm going to pull up Columbus City School District. They received 37.9. So that means almost all of their kids were limited, basic, or untested. In fact, percent of their students were limited, meaning almost no learning. 51.9% of the kids in Columbus Public Schools, the largest school district in the state of Ohio. And these are their achievement numbers, or their numbers here. Only 13% of their kids passed the math test in the 5th grade. 16% in 6th grade, 12% in 7th grade. 23% of their kids passed the English language arts. These numbers are math 2, 7%. Now there's some different testing going on here. Geometry, 9.4% of their kids passed the geometry test in Columbus City schools.
And there's historical data on this as well. What the past?
Yes, you can do the comparison to similar districts, and then the trend. So this is the trend of this 3rd grade. So this is what's happened in Columbus City over the last 3 years, or since 2017. So they were at 39.8. They made it up to 43, and now they're at 23. And I can pull this for literally, you can do a drop down and pull every single one of these. So, and not everything is tested in each grade. So you're going to get some data is going to be a little less than others. High school. So these are the high school numbers. You can see they're off a bit. Some of these are off significantly. I mean, some of them weren't great, but geometry, I mean, these things have plummeted. So now let's go up to, here we go, East Cleveland, 31.9%, and 1.8% of their kids passed the math test in 5th grade. As you can see, they're in single digits pretty much across the board, up and down here. This is mostly a minority school district. Pretty much most of their kids, 63.4% of them, had limited, basically, you could probably answer the letter C on every one of these and do better than this. In fact, if I were those school districts, I'd just have all their kids answer the letter C, and they would probably quadruple their numbers. Youngstown, I've got Youngstown City is on academic distress, or has been. Their math, 5th grade, 2.9% passage rate. Well, I mean, English language arts, 16% of their 3rd graders were proficient. That meant the rest of them were below proficient. Now, this is bad. I mean, this is not good. These kids need major remediation. And if they don't get this remediation, they're going to fall behind. I mean, he was showing us that data on the PowerPoint, the professor was, of, how much of an economic decline in income and so forth you're going to have over the years. It's bad. I mean, there has to be. So anyway, it's not good.
And if I could step in here as well, where quickly before we started here, I put together a graph just with today's data, and these are 0 to 19-year-olds. So this even includes adults with COVID, and the numbers, just what you're showing there, where there's declines. There are significant declines in the last 2 years, and we're doing this to our kids, and we're still doing this to our kids. And there's a bunch of cases, but you can't even, and the cases are the blue, and these are on the same axis, and you don't see anything in the hospitalizations. I mean, that's incidental. These hospitalizations are incidental to their being in the hospital for the most part. And what you were talking about there before with the chronic absenteeism, not even including the kids who are out because they are a case of COVID, or any of the people who were quarantined around them, or anything. I mean, I would be so interested if somebody has the time and the patience to go to that ODA website. I mean, that thing has so much data there, and to start building up a database of exactly what schools did what and when. I mean, when did they go back to full in person? When did they go back and see if there's a connection between those? Because intuitively, we know that kids, when they're at home, when they're not in a learning environment, that they're going to do worse. But to be able to show that conclusively, I mean, because this is really important stuff. If we are going to continue doing this stuff, and I mean, the next thing will be the vaccinations in schools. Although I should mention, if people are not familiar and not following the whole political stuff that's been going on, Senator Brenner was the one who put into it was House Bill 244 back in springtime, or it was early summer.
Yes, it was June.
Where right as you guys were finishing up for the year, you slipped in some language into one of the bills saying that you cannot, public schools and state higher education institutions could not mandate non-FDA approved vaccines on anyone in their districts, either employees or students, and you could not discriminate based on that status. So you were the senator who did that, who slipped that one in, and in many ways that's the reason for a lot of the schools allowing choice on masks, whether you're vaccinated or not, So, I mean, this is.
And the governor signed it, interestingly. I think he knew that we had the votes in both chambers, but I think he also was looking at it, and I think he was praying for FDA approval, which FDA approval happened, but not for, this is emergency use authorization for the kids. So while it may have applied, I think there's still some question marks as to which vaccines are actually being given out. But no, here I'll share my screen again. And what I'll pull up here.
Oh, not this
is
one.
the bill. Right there's the bill.
This one.
So it's House Bill 244. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Representative White, Representative Lampton's bill. Passed the Senate on a partisan breakdown of 25-8 and the House 62-34. And then this was the section of the bill that describes basically what the bill did. It's had to deal with military children and quarantining and other issues. But basically, what it did is it prohibited public schools and higher education from requiring an individual to receive a vaccine that's not fully approved, and discriminating against an individual who has not received such a vaccine, including by requiring an individual to engage or refrain in engaging in activities or precautions that differ from the activities or precautions of an individual who has received such a vaccine. So that amendment, I worked with my colleagues on this one in the Senate. We agreed and put it in the House bill, sent it back. They concurred, went to the governor, and it was like a couple weeks later, he signed the bill into law. So, you know, that was one thing that we were able to do. And I'll stop sharing my screen here, I guess. But that's what we did, and it's currently, I think, has impacted or affected the overall policies, which has given some local school boards the authority or feel like they have the ability to remove mask requirements. I met with the Ohio Federation of Teachers, a couple of their representatives, a few weeks ago. This would have been the end of October, so this is about a month ago now. And they were telling me that their teachers were getting burnt out as if it were in April. And the reason is because of behavioral problems. And I'm guessing, and because kids are frustrated because they are behind. They are not, you know, if you're a kid and you don't know how to read, or you're behind where you're supposed to be in reading, it's going to be hard to learn any content or anything going forward. I mean, we need an intensive amount of remediation and effort to help the kids out who need help. And I think this is exactly why these urban schools, especially all these that had these numbers that were in the 30s, required their kids to have masks right from the get-go, because they did not want to go back to remote learning, because they were concerned if they did, they'd have the same kind of problems. And right now we're running into all kinds of problems. There's teacher shortages, there's substitute shortages. Transportation is a mess. The kids are not getting transported. If kids are going to community schools or charter non-public, the state, through our taxpayer dollars, does pay to transport those kids, but we don't pay for the kids necessarily to be in those schools. Those are paid for by private dollars, but unless it's a chartered public school, then we do, but those are public schools. These kids are, and we had a horrific thing, this was about a month ago too, the kids are getting either not picked up in the mornings, or they're not being brought home in the afternoons. So in other words, the schools like Columbus City schools will pick the kids up in the morning and then say, we don't have enough bus drivers, we're not delivering your kids at home at night. So these charter schools are having to then call all the parents or send out a text message, please come and pick up your kid, creating logistics problems. And this is causing people to, it was causing backups onto roadways. So Bethel Road is where a couple of them I know we had the description of. There's one of the charter schools was located on there, backing out onto the road, causing traffic problems because they were told, and they're required, by the way, these kids are required to be transported by Columbus Public. I just found out right before Thanksgiving break that Columbus Public, that the Ohio Department of Education was going to claw back $2.6 million of Columbus Public school money because they weren't transporting the kids per law. I mean, this is not a question of if. And, for those of you that say, well, they shouldn't be transporting these kids, they're almost all these kids that are going to these schools are kids of economically disadvantaged or minorities, and are trying to get out of schools like Columbus. And, and Columbus has got problems where they don't even have enough bus drivers. We found out in this meeting where I attended, they were hoping that they needed about 800 bus drivers for this school year. They only had 535 and hope to hire 100 more, is what they told the Ohio Department of Education, which means they were still going to be a couple hundred bus drivers short. I guess they did change a lot of the bus routes to make them more efficient. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. But so these kids going to these chartered public schools, they're missing school. So they're now falling behind and they're not learning. So they've got to, this is the problem. So now I've also heard from my suburban superintendents who are telling me, look, they're having a hard time getting, basic things like tires for their school buses, oil filters. One of them mentioned to me that they were happy to get 8 oil filters. I think it was Westerville City Schools, to put oil filters in their school buses because of supply chain problems. And then we also heard that GFS and some of the suppliers for the food services for the schools are also having problems because of supply chain problems. So, I've had a lot of people, because I chair education, I get people from all over the state telling me, hey, are you aware of this going on in X school? And they're showing what the diet is for the kids in the lunch line. They have nothing. It looks like, something that would have been a Peanuts Thanksgiving dinner type of food. And I saw photos. They've sent me photos of what the kids' lunch was, and it was bad. It was not nutritious, and it was basically like pretzels and stuff.
I hadn't even heard of that one. I didn't even consider that as part of what's going on.
Let alone broadband access. This is the other thing. We are still sitting in this is the year 2021, but we don't have fast enough broadband. If you go with all these kids that have the phones, they may have, the smartphones, but they don't have internet access, so they can't do their schoolwork. I know kids here in the rural school system in Buckeye Valley. Buckeye Valley did what they could. They gave out, hotspots so that the kids could do their homework in the cars, in the parking lot of the high school and the school, because they didn't have broadband access at home or didn't have access to it. So this is a huge problem. I've supported the broadband expansion, and the one part that I do agree that we need to do, and we need to do kind of what the federal government is doing on that part. That's one part I will agree with on, is we need to have massive expansion of broadband to get it everywhere. And we got third world countries that have some better broadband than we do. And kids, if you've got 5 kids or 3 kids or 2 kids all trying, plus the parents and everybody trying to use the internet, if you don't have enough broadband, these kids aren't going to be able to do their schoolwork. Those are the problems the schools were dealing with over the last school year and are dealing with right now. And in fact, when the quarantine rules came in from the Ohio Department of Health, I was questioning them because they were putting in such onerous problems, which they've since changed. There was one of the school systems down in southwestern Ohio in Warren County requested that they be a pilot for how they quarantine the kids. Basically, just put the mask on with the kid that might have been exposed, and then see. They've not had any spread, so they've expanded it statewide. I will say that that's a good thing, so that we can keep the kids in the classrooms. But the football stadiums get packed with people, shoulder to shoulder, and nobody's wearing a mask. Yes, they're outdoors, but they're shoulder to shoulder yelling and screaming. So, if anybody's going to have a super spreader event, I would think those would be events where they would happen. Yeah, we've got kids.
We have the data telling us a case is meaningless in our young. A case doesn't matter. They don't get significantly sick. The data is blindingly clear on that. Although now I'm starting to hear anecdotally people talking about, all of a sudden, interestingly enough, ever since kind of the first week of November, that more and more young children are getting genuinely sick with COVID, and that's when the expansion down to 5 to 11-year-olds happened, and it's hard not to kind of question what's going on here. I mean, it's very frustrating because there's no need for this. We're acting, as you just said there, we have college students and older, gathering by the hundreds of thousands, and they're more at risk of actual symptomatic and hospital type illness. Mm-hmm. And yet we're doing this to our kids who are at essentially zero risk, except for very, very few of them who are, we know they're at a higher risk, and we can spend our money to help them at home or however we manage this. But all of this is, it's insane. We're taking the kids out of the classroom and quarantining
lockdowns, quarantines. All of this has just been bad. It's disrupted. I mean, their athletics. It's disrupted, their general routines, and then we wonder why the kids have behavioral problems.
Yeah,
so now the schools are asking for, well, we need more counselors. Well, no, maybe we just need to get the kids back in the classrooms, let them learn, and then for the parents who want their kids to wear a mask, leave it up to the parents to do that. I just think that, and I think a lot of school systems have gone that way, and I think that's the way to go. I question the effectiveness of the masks. I mean, the data, I think if you're wearing an N95 mask without a respirator, it might in fact reduce it spread, but just a cloth mask where the kids are flopping them around and stuffing them in their pockets or pulling them below their noses and all this, I don't see how any of that is effective. And I think that's why we've seen spread. And I don't understand the public policy on it. I think that it would be better if we had the kids back in the classrooms, and all the teachers they've been vaccinated. I think almost all of them are getting the booster shots, even, whether you agree or disagree with them, that's already happening. So the teachers, I think, feel protected or are protected. So and if the kids are vaccinated, you're right. I don't know that it's necessary that they should be, because their risk of death is 89% of the deaths in Ohio are over the age of 60, and over half of them are over the age of 80. So it's, kids are not going to get sick and die from this. And actually anybody underneath the age of 60 really isn't, unless you've got some other major, comorbidity. So one of my reminders to check the Brown score, but anyway, I'm probably going to start rooting for the Bengals at this point, since they seem to be the team to move forward. But no, I think that a lot of our public policy has not worked, and especially with these kids. Now, the question I have, and I would ask everybody who's watching, is to talk to their school board. What are your local school boards doing to make sure that these kids are being remediated? And go to those pages and see what the achievement numbers are. I mean, this may take parents doing extra time helping their kids over this next couple of years. It's going to take businesses. It's going to take, a lot of effort to try to get these kids caught up, and to try to prevent them from falling behind any further. I think it's something that has to happen, and we need to get all hands on deck on that too. So we need to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. No more lockdowns, no more, quarantining kids and keeping them out of the classrooms, because they just don't learn.
Yeah, and a lot that I hear, I mean, there are a whole lot of parents who have been, going to their school board meetings, running for the school board, all of those things, and still many of these school boards are just, they just live in la la land. Is there any other way to get them to act in a rational way?
Well, simply put, use the Ohio Department of Education's that page. Go there, pull up your achievement scores, and ask them, what are you guys doing to help these kids? And maybe your scores are really good, in which case your school district's doing fine, such as yours. But even like my local Olentangy or some of these districts, what are they doing to try to improve the achievement of the kids within the districts? And Olentangy is probably, in my case, the one that can say, hey, look, we haven't received any additional federal dollars here. All the other districts have. So they would be probably the one exception that I would say that, hey, we don't, and they're working. They do have extra money. I've talked to the superintendent, so they're working to try to help that, regardless of whether they get it or not. But we're working to try to get them some money in the next round. But there's plenty of money that's sitting there. These school districts should be able to hire more substitutes or increase the pay of the substitutes, even if it's in the short term, to get them in to help, remediate these kids and spend extra hours, because that's the only way we're going to get these kids caught up. And, we're going to see a major catastrophe of productivity and of kids being able to get good jobs or anything outside of school if they don't know how to read, write, do arithmetic, do the basics.
So here's a question for you. Under current law, are schools allowed to be remote for more than 3 days?
The current law, I believe, is they had to set up a situation where we're changing the law. Senate Bill 229 does that. Actually, that's part of the reason why we're passing it. Some of the districts are allowed to use what's called blended learning. So yes, they can. And I believe the local school boards can still make those decisions. So if Columbus Public Board votes and the superintendent says we want to go fully remote, they can do it. It's local control. But we're giving them some options in the code. The districts had to have made some points at the beginning of the school year when they did this to be able to do some of these things. So you can't just automatically go fully remote. You had to have set up an online academy, which many school districts did. So kids are enrolled there and they can go remotely. So for the parents who are concerned that their kid might get sick and bring something home because they've got grandma that they live with, those kids in those types of schools can do a remote classroom. In fact, they can do an e-school. E-school has actually outperformed most of our public schools in those areas just because that's what they do. They've had 20 years worth of doing it. They know how to do distance learning, and they've conditioned the kids to be able to learn remotely. In other words, those kids are having to put in a little more effort on their own to be able to learn because they're not, forced to do something in a classroom. They have to do it from home. So their parents are going to have to be on top of them as well to do the work and get the work done and to get caught up.
So this isn't true then, that the Dublin superintendent, that they are not allowed, that they are allowed, but they have to jump through some hoops first before
there's some hoops there. 229 is hoping to fix some of that. So they can put the kids, what the Ohio Department of Education has done, they've kind of looked at the code and kind of bent it a little bit. They've interpreted it liberally to say that school districts can use blended learning for kids who have to be quarantined. And so what we're doing is we're putting that in the code for this school year. It just says, look, we're allowing it to happen through the end of the school year. So they can do that, and many of them are. And if you are a traditional public district, we put in some new requirements for the e-school. So last year, there was nothing. It was kind of like the ECOT model, where there were no restrictions on what you could do with distance learning in the last school year. We did put some criteria in the budget that said you now have to track your students. You have to make sure they're attending. If you're doing asynchronous learning, you need to follow up with them, make sure they're actually doing the schoolwork. So we did put some of those criteria in the budget for this school year. And I think a lot of school districts chose not to do it because it's too much work. They'd have to do too much follow through on a remote basis, which it is harder to do. So they chose not to. So maybe the Dublin superintendent is probably pointing to that section of the code and saying it's just not feasible for us to do it. But we require our e-schools to do it. So they are now. In fact, I was the one that helped change that law for the people who've gotten on my case in the past. I'm the reason why the law was changed to actually put some accountability in. I was one of the first to put in financial accountability even in those school districts. So do you have any other questions? I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you wanted to talk about some of the other bills, I know I'd be happy to.
Well, yeah, if you want to step into that little buzzsaw there. I told you before that last week I did one about House Bill 218, and definitely people are curious as to what is going on with House Bill 218 now going over to the Senate and just zipping on through there. I mean,
Well, I don't know how quickly it's going to be zipping on through here. We will be meeting for caucus. We weren't going to meet this coming week, but we are now meeting for caucus and committees on Tuesday. The Senate was going to be off this week and next week, but we're actually back. And the one committee is actually meeting.
Tuesday.
And I think I may have gotten off that. But the one committee that has that, Senator Peterson chairs it, is going to be hearing 218. They're going to have proponent, sponsor and proponent testimony on 218 Tuesday afternoon in the Ohio Senate. So we're going to have a caucus on it earlier in the day, I believe. I think we're going to sit down and discuss what do we want in it. I think what we want in it is an ability to protect at least kids and people going to public entities. I will tell you that within our own caucus, there's a lot of discussion. Hey, if it's a private business, they should be allowed to do what they want. You know, if they put up requirements for vaccines, I mean, we clearly see that there's problems with any business that requires a vaccine because people are just quitting. It's an employee market, not an employer market. So basic economics is telling people to say, look, if you're going to require me to do something and I don't want to do it, I'll just quit and go to another job elsewhere that won't. And that's what's happening. This is why you're seeing a lot of the major institutions change some of their public policies over mandatory vaccinations. Even the airlines made some changes on that. So, you know, I would like to see us recognize natural immunity.
That in an appropriate manner, as opposed to the nonsense manner in 218, which it basically removes natural immunity from the table because it's written in such a nonsensical way where that you cannot prove what they're asking you to prove for it. I mean, that's a dangerous.
Yeah, we need to make some changes there. I don't know if Representative Cutrona is watching, but there were several concerns I have, and I had some people, a couple of my local constituents here who post a lot on this. What happens if some contractors working for like Ohio State, you know, requiring because of OSHA, even though OSHA's backed down, they back down until the lawsuits go through. But what if, you know, if they're requiring somebody who's 1099, all their people before they step in their institution to be vaccinated, regardless of medical exemptions or anything. I mean, some of this stuff is just ludicrous to me. And you know, if somebody's got natural immunity and they, again, though, it's asking people to show proof of something. And I just, if you're going to do this, then you're going to have to do it from now to the end of time. I don't think people get that. I mean, if you're going to wear a mask now, you're going to be wearing masks from now until you die.
And we learned that with the Omicron thing that just came out of nowhere. And it's just like,
if that Omicron one is what they're saying, which is a very mild form of COVID-19, might be better for people who haven't gotten it to get it because they're not going to die from it, it sounds like. But they'll get the antibodies and the T cells in the long run. And it would seem to me that would be better public policy because that might help build up more of a herd immunity, at least enough to give us, you know, some natural immunity to it. And especially if the Omicron, you know, I guess is 40% less effective for these vaccines. Well, Johnson & Johnson's like 60% effective, and you've just reduced that by 40%. What's the point of the Johnson & Johnson vaccination?
Well, all of these, I mean, this is what it's going to do when you vaccinate vast numbers of people against one singular or two antigens. It's going to mutate away from it. That's how it will be. It will even if these vaccines didn't wane, which of course we know they wane within 6 months. That's why we're doing the boosters, because it's waning immunity. Then you add on top of that eventually the variants or even strains, which this might be a completely new strain, will mutate away from the vaccine immunity. So it's just like, I mean, when we're dealing with something like 218, which is it's really expressly allowing and permitting businesses and schools to mandate these things, like they had vaccine, drug, biological product, and genetic immunotherapy, without having to justify it in any way is really concerning, because it's like, okay, you can just do whatever you want And this does have a real risk of harming people, but you don't have to justify it anyway. And right here, we're talking about a situation where it's limited in length of time of usefulness, and we know already we're starting to mutate away from it. And so this is where the whole argument of, well, businesses have the right to do whatever they want, that there's got to be some kind of limit on that as well, in terms of, or at least the information they're allowed, or for instance, in what you had put into House Bill 244, where it's like, okay, you can do this, but you can't discriminate. Something that is like, okay, people can make their own decisions about the situation, but throw some brakes on here. This is pure nonsense. And even when the argument,
the Senate right now, my understanding is we're going to be in for just a couple weeks. So I don't even, I mean, we've got scheduled session days on the week of the 8th and the 15th, and then we're off for the rest of the year. So I find it hard that we would be able to move the bill that quickly. Based on,
moved through the House that quickly. I mean, that was
it did. That was a quick amendment. I think it does put a lot of things in there that, I mean, it's, I don't know. There's some sunset provisions in there.
that are
I think there's some question, we can always change the law again down the road. So I mean, for the people that say, okay, well, it's going to sunset or something like that, well, yeah, but we can always change that down the road too. If we need to extend it, we can do that. We've done that in another bill, especially with the COVID stuff. And I voted for the funding, and I know that we received from the federal government. In fact, actually, that was what they put in the bill that myself and Senator Blessing were carrying in Senate Bill 111. Those were COVID dollars for schools, and we ended up putting it into 244, an amendment that went back the other direction. But there's a couple good things in 218, but there's some things in there that I think, from a public policy standpoint, it's going to be kind of hard to enforce, and then I think it may legitimize some things that maybe I would be concerned with. And so I think we're going to have some deliberation and discussion in the Senate over this. Senate President Huffman usually wants to have multiple hearings on a bill, and we've had them. I mean, we had on 229, which I knew we needed to extend this, blended learning and some of the other authorization in it for schools, for allowing them flexibility this school year for teaching students. We're going to vote on concurrence on the 8th of December. So the plan right now will be, when we're back, not next week, but the week after, or this week, the week after this week, since we're on Sunday already, that we'll be concurring on that bill. But that went through multiple hearings in my committee, went through a couple hearings in the House, and they've since passed it, and we've got it. But that process started. We started writing it in September. So, this has taken a few months just to get it to this point. I mean, it's going to go to the governor sometime in December, early December. It does have an emergency clause, so it goes into effect immediately. And I think we're in good shape there. But, there's some things here that we've had to adjust on the fly. And General Assembly's adjusting on the fly can take weeks or months. So it's not something that can happen necessarily overnight.
I mean, but that's an important thing to note as well. With 218, a lot of people are desperate for it because they're staring down the barrel of a gun at their current jobs, particularly the healthcare workers, and they're like, oh, at least it's something, it can save my job. No, it can't, because 218, even if the Senate would pass it out this week, it wouldn't go into effect for probably 100 days, because most likely Governor DeWine would not sign it. He would sit on it, and it would have to then sit until he.
I think he would. I think at this point he would veto it.
Yeah,
that would be my guess is what would happen. In which case, then we've got to come back and override.
And then 90 days.
I don't. So I think whatever we do, I think the Senate is going to look to try to get something that makes a little more sense, maybe, and is something that I don't, if we pass it, we know we've got the votes, and something that the governor will have to take a look at, kind of like he did with 244. After all, he did sign the bill, where the amendment where I placed it in there. So it left it up to local schools to make some decisions there. And I think, there's 611 local school districts in the state of Ohio. So there's 611 school boards to make those decisions. And, hundreds of community schools and charter non-public schools, Catholic, Jewish, you name it, type of schools that are out there where they've got their local boards who are going to be making their decisions locally. And I think that's the way most of the members of our caucus, at least in the Republican side, want it to be. I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So one other question. As a state senator, and we've got tons of people who want to make their voices heard, and actually, because it is an incredibly frustrating thing getting to the legislators. And what is it? What is the most impactful thing for a legislator when it comes to something like a bill like this? And we are not happy with it. We do not like it. Different parts of it. Some parts are good, and some people like different parts and all that. How do we get actually heard by our legislators? What's the best method?
First of all, here's if I'm a legislator, which I represent the 19th Ohio Senate District. So if you're in Delaware County, Knox County, or the 22nd House District in Franklin County, those constituents contacting my office are going to have a better impact than it's coming from all over the state of Ohio. Now, if you're the Senate president or you're the chair of the Education Committee and I get, emails about education stuff, okay, I'm going to listen to all that stuff because I chair that committee and, I'm going to hear it from wherever it's coming from in the state of Ohio. And I assume the same with, leadership positions. They're going to hear from constituents all over the state because they are in the leadership position of that chamber. But the most impactful are coming directly from constituents within our own districts who are reaching out to us one-on-one, either via email. And somebody sends out lots of the standardized formatted, emails. Those don't have as much of an impact because we assume that some organization has prepared them ahead of time and have sent them in. But if individual cases, calls to our offices, those are very impactful. I listen to them. And people coming down and giving testimony in committee can, if it's good testimony and is persuasive, it can have an impact on a legislator. But if you're coming in and you're coming in so one-sided, the other side's not going to listen to you. And if you've got the middle that doesn't quite know where they want to be, those are the people you're trying to talk to. You need to do a way to persuade them that your position in what's happening and impacting your business or your personal life is such that they need to take action on a bill. And I think that's important to show legislators. And I feel like, I listen to constituents, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle they are. And I've got some people who are like, well, Senator Brenner, you said you were going to visit and meet with us, and we're not because we're liberal and we believe you don't believe. No, we'll listen to you. I had one guy who wanted to.
So, I mean, yeah. You talk to me, and I'm not even in your district.
Not in the district, so yeah, no, and but you also have a wide broadcast as well of a lot of people all over the state, including a lot of people in my district. So it's important to, reach out to you and other types of groups like this. I try to listen to everybody and see, is there a middle ground? Sometimes there isn't. A lot of times there is. I mean, if you take a look, and to let everybody know, if you look at almost all the votes in the General Assembly, I'm guessing 90 to 95%, in at least the Ohio General Assembly, are bipartisan, wide bipartisan. So in other words, there's 33 state senators in the Ohio Senate. You might get on any day, a couple senators will never be there because, there's always one or two that are out. But you'll get 31 to nothing votes, and it'll be one after another. And this isn't just road naming bills. I mean, I've got a bill with Senator Antonio. She's across the aisle. Senate Bill 105, which deals with video cameras in nursing homes to allow loved ones to be able to watch over their loved ones that are in a nursing home and be able to have a video camera in there. We had to set parameters up so that, we're not trying to do gotcha cameras or anything like that. We're just trying to make sure that, the loved ones are being taken care of. That bill's now passed the House, and we're going to concur on that, I believe, the week of the 8th. There was a couple minor changes to the bill, which we agreed to. and that's going to go to the governor. I think he'll sign it. It's a good bill, but it was something that in the pandemic, especially if you're a loved one and you're kept out of where your loved one is in a nursing home, you can't even see them. And this is something that's important to have, and it is something that where the person's putting the video camera in their nursing home, it's paid for by the individuals. It's not, government mandating, requiring the nursing home to pay for it. Although they're paid a lot of money, and they probably could afford putting one in there, but this isn't. So this is up to the individuals, and if there's consent and all this stuff has to be done. But that was wide bipartisan support, and it's something that came to me as constituent complaint, and to Senator Antonio. We're calling it Esther's Law because it was her constituent that there was a tragedy involved. So we're working to try to get that together. And I think you see that at least at the state level. You don't see that at the congressional level or in the U.S. Senate or U.S. House, but at least at the state level that happens. And it's just some of these other issues that come into play where you'll get very partisan votes on them.
I did not know that. I mean, that might also explain the absolute gridlock that's going on as well, because it sounds like normally there isn't. But it's unreal to me how these bills are just, some of them just fly right through, and some of them are completely stymied. I mean, you had put forth Senate Bill 169, and I believe you said that it's in the exact same committee as 218 is going to be heard in, and it's not. It's just sitting there, and it's
we've to let people know. I mean, our caucuses meet. So the Republican Senate caucus will meet. It's behind closed doors, yes, but it's a way for us to freely express our opinions on bills without being criticized publicly, or we can criticize a colleague without necessarily criticizing them publicly. And that's the idea of the caucus. Democrats do it, Republicans do it. If there was a third party, they would do it. So we do have these conversations. I think one thing that I know our Senate Republican caucus has discussed is they don't want any more government mandates on businesses. They want businesses to be left alone in this area. I slightly disagree on this particular subject of mandatory vaccinations, because especially for ones that have not been around and have been utilized for 100 years.
I don't understand why they want that last year. I don't know. I do not understand why the businesses want to have this power. I mean, if you do this, I would imagine that it would set you up for potential liability or difficulty hiring people. Or I do not understand why they as business entities are interested. Besides the fear of liability, which of course that's already written into many of these bills, which is good and should. Yeah. But why do you want this power? It's nuts.
I asked the chair or the CEO of the Bureau of Workers' Comp back in June or May, when in the insurance committee and the workers' comp budget went through the Ohio Senate. How many claims have been made for adverse reactions? There haven't been many. I mean, there have been. He said there have been through workers' comp, but there haven't been many payouts, and the payouts have been very small. I actually got the list a couple weeks ago, and it's minuscule.
Is that public data?
It's public data. I think there were 40 claims and only 6 approvals. Of the 6 approvals, 5 were self-insured and 1 was from the general fund. So, most of the claims that they saw that they didn't pay out were, their arm, swelled up or something. And, they had a rash and then it went away a couple days later. Well, how do you pay out for something like that? I think that's probably where they were. I don't think anybody has attributed any deaths or anything like that. Otherwise, I think that would definitely be an issue. And then how do you attribute it to the specific vaccine? Because my understanding from talking to workers' comp is that there were other extenuating circumstances for all these other issues. So, which is why they were dismissed in all those cases.
Which is going to happen. It doesn't matter what level you're doing it at. I mean, because there's always another condition that you can blame it on, and just in the reverse situation with COVID, where actually there are other things that probably led to death, and it's coincidental they had COVID, but we're going to put that all on COVID, and now we've got the reverse situation with the vaccine, which is exceptionally frustrating.
Yep. Um,
I don't know
so,
how much, I mean, hopefully, you know, that helps some people how to approach this 218 situation, getting heard. I mean, that is our frustration as Ohio citizens, because we do not feel heard, except for the very rare legislator like yourself here. So thank you very much for coming on.
you're welcome. Glad I could be on. The Browns are losing 6-0 to the Ravens, so two field goals by the Ravens. So clearly a really offensive juggernaut going on there. One of my Browns there. Well, anyway,
and I'd like to
glad I could be on. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for coming on and talking to us about this, and that website, the ODE website. I had no idea about it. And I mean, that's another,
it's all there.
Data.
Public data. Anybody can go there. They can look at it. They've got to click on the achievement, and then you can look at the individual data. And then, you know, that it doesn't tell everything, but I think that Fordham or somebody who testified, 94.6% of the kids were in fact tested last school year. So there were some who weren't, but most kids were tested. So the data's pretty solid, I would say. And now we just need to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that led to this major fall off in learning, a lot of learning loss. And then one thing the professor, before you go, one thing the professor said is that third graders are tested at the beginning of the school year and the end of the school year. There was learning loss from the end of last school year to the beginning of this school year when they were retested. So it's definitely a sign that we need to be stepping it up. And for the parents out there who are listening, grandparents, spend some extra time with your kids. If they seem like they're struggling, I know you're all struggling too, or we've had some other issues. Do your best to try to help out with the kids and help, you know, the teachers as best you can to try to make sure these kids learn and get caught up.
All right. Thank you, Senator Brenner, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.